Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Another edition of the free training Thursdays. Today we're going to be talking about rules-based calendaring in Abacus Law. But before we get started, can you just confirm for me that you can see my screen okay by using the little hand-raising button there in your GoToMeeting window? Just click that hand-raising button if you can see my Abacus Law program. Beautiful. Thank you very much. And since you responded to that, I'll assume you can hear me just fine. So I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and put the hands down now. Appreciate that. All right. My name's Scott Heist. I see a lot of familiar names out there. So thanks for joining me again. And for all of our new attendees, thanks for joining. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about rules-based calendaring. And if you have ever been on a training with me, when it comes to calendaring, one thing I always say is that rules-based calendaring is one of those aspects of this program that if you master, it will make your life so much easier. It really will. Calendaring can be a real pain, especially if we're talking about civil procedure rules, okay, things like that, or really just any sort of, rule that has tons of different events in it. Because a lot of times, the way it used to be is, and if you're using Outlook as your primary calendar, you got to calendar all those things manually. So, when the judge sets a trial date, you got to calendar 50 deadlines leading up to that trial date. You got to calendar 20 follow-up appointments or events or filings after the trial date. So it can be a real pain to have to do that on your own. The entire reason you own a program like Abacus Law is because you want to make your life a little bit easier and more efficient, right? When we do that in our programs, we're basically minimizing our chance for error. And that's the whole point with rules, okay? We take the pressure off of you, the user, and we automate what gets calendared based off of our rules. So, the less human hands we have in the action, the less the chance for human error. So that's why we want to put that responsibility on the program. And then we just learned how to invoke calendar rules so that they work when we want them to. All right? So that's what we're going to focus on today. So before we get into the ins and outs and dissect, what the behind the scenes of a calendar rule looks like, let's take a look at our calendar in general. All right. Now, if anybody has any questions about anything that we discussed today, I want you to use the little questions box that you have in your GoToMeeting window so that we can review those at the end of our session. I will do my best to get to every question, but if I skip your question, don't be alarmed. I will follow up with you by email after our webinar. Also, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar as well to all of our registered guests. So you'll get that as well. And you can also go to abacusnext.com/webinars and view all of our past webinars by just scrolling to the past webinars section on that page. So we're looking at our calendar here, okay? I'm just looking at the daily organizer. So if we look at this calendar, we've got this big main section here that's broken down by time of day. And that's where we see, different appointments and things like that. Essentially anything that has a time associated with it is an appointment, okay? The deposition is at 9 a.m. The court appearance is at 10 a.m. The client appointment is at 2 p.m. That's an appointment, right? We're attaching a time to it. But a lot of times what we see when we talk about calendar rules is, we don't really have events in those rules that have times of day associated with them, because a lot of times it's just reminders. They're reminders about filing deadlines, or they're reminders that we need to call a client and check on that fee agreement, or it's a reminder that we need to call a client and ask where, the financial documents are that we requested, things like that. So when you're working with calendar rules, when you invoke a calendar rule, always know that oftentimes that event is going to be in the top right section of your calendar called reminders. All right. Potentially Things could also show in the things to do section. Those are tasks. And then if you manipulate a rule, an event within a rule, to have a time of day, well, then you may see it in the main section as well. Like, for instance, if I invoke the California trial rule for May 2nd at 9 a.m., well, whenever I calendar that rule, I'm actually saying that trial starts at 9 a.m. So that's an example where we may see a time of day associated with our event. But like I said, for the most part, the majority of the events that are within your rule, they are reminders, okay? And reminders don't have a time associated. So before we dive into, dissecting the rule, let's talk about how we actually invoke a rule, because there's two different ways you can do it, okay? And this applies for whether or not you're calendaring from the calendar or you're going directly into an actual matter record and, calendaring from within the matter record. Doesn't matter. You can do it either way, okay? But there's essentially two ways that you invoke a rule. The first way is by just double-clicking on the calendar and opening a new event window, okay? When you open a new event window, the trigger field for a rule is the what field, okay? So for anybody who's ever calendared an event before in AbacusLaw, you're probably familiar with the what field, okay? This is a code that we utilize to classify what an event is. And this is a very important field. We use this field for reporting on our events or filtering our events. If the attorney comes to me and says, hey, how many SOL expirations do I have in the next 60 days? Well, I'm going to use that what code to find that answer. How many trial dates do I have in the next 90 days? I'm going to use that what code to find that answer, right? So the what code is very important. So when you click that little arrow and you look at all the different what codes that you have in your system, you need to be mindful of the fact that there are some what codes in here that are attached to rules. For instance, SOL 1 year. If I use that what code on a single event, the system is going to recognize the fact that that is attached to a rule, and it's going to ask me at that point if I want to invoke that rule as well. In other words, do you just want to calendar this one event, or do you want to calendar this one event and all of the related events that go along with the rule? So you get that option whenever you manually choose a what code in the what field of your event window. All right? So that's one way. The other way is to actually just right-click on your calendar, either in the time section or in the reminder section, really anywhere on the calendar or in the matter events tab. If you right-click, there is actually an option in the right-click menu that says add events from a rule. This is actually the way that I'm partial to doing it. I don't know that there is, if one way is better than the other, so to speak. This is just the way I've been used to doing it. So that's usually the way I teach people primarily to do it. So I'll right-click on my time, and I'll just select add events from a rule, okay? So let's say maybe trial is set for Tuesday the 4th, okay, of June. Well, I would go out to June 4th on my calendar, trials at 9 a.m. I would right-click on 9 a.m. and I would select add events from a rule. That opens up a list of all of my current rules in my system, okay? It gives me the rule name, which is essentially a code for the rule, and then it gives me the rule description, which is what that code entails. It's what that rule pertains to. So in my little rule list, I would look up my trial rule, and I've got a couple different ones here. I'll just use our basic California trial. So I would choose that rule from my list, and I would click done. And notice how my what code has been auto-filled for me now based off that rule. It says CA trial. That is very important. All right. Now I'm just going to fill in the rest of my event like I normally would. Like, for instance, who is the attorney assigned to this trial date. I can go ahead and choose that from my list. I can also put in a where if I want to, like maybe, is it LA Superior? Is it San Diego Superior? You get to put that in. Okay, I get to put in a little note here. Okay, start of trial. I'm sure your notes will be more detailed than mine. But don't forget to always link your events to the appropriate matters that they pertain to. This is very important, all right? Does you no good to calendar a trial date if you're not telling the person who or what case that trial is for, right? So we want to always make sure that when we calendar an event, if it has to do with a matter, we link it to our matter, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just choose a certain matter here, and I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Notice what happened when I clicked Save. When I clicked Save, the system caught the fact that I utilized a rule to calendar this event, and it's asking me, it's saying, you are scheduling an event that is associated with a rule. Do you want the related events scheduled? Well, you're usually going to say yes to this. That's the whole reason you chose the rule, right? So you're going to say yes here. And then what this is going to do is it's going to actually start to run through that rule, and it's going to find abnormalities. Like, for instance, here is an event that falls on a holiday, okay? We may want to change that. It also just so happens to be Sunday, but we may want to change that. So instead of doing it on the 21st, we want to make sure that that gets calendared, for the 19th, okay, the Friday before. All right, see how it keeps finding all of my little holidays, and I can make those changes if I want to. Okay, I can move those to the Friday before or move them to the Monday after. You have the control. And then what you end up finding, or what you end up being presented with, is a list of every event that is about to be calendared, okay, and exactly what day it's being calendared on, all right? So you can see for that California trial rule, I got a lot of events in here. Okay, this rule is pretty involved. So if I need to go through and delete some of these, I can do that if they don't pertain to me or my scenario. Okay, that's why we have the code and also the note description about what is actually being calendared for that day. All right, so I can go through and delete some of these out of there if I don't need them. Okay, just click the checkbox next to them and select delete. Or if I need to, some of these other ones that fall on like a Saturday right here, let's see, serve notice of motion. Well, we're probably not serving anything on a Saturday, so we're going to go ahead and maybe just double click on that and change that date. See? Change it to the Friday before. Save that, and when I save that, it's going to ask me if I want to update any related events. So this is a really cool little feature right here. This will save you a lot of time. Remember, our calendar rules are all based off mathematical calculations, right? We have 20 days between event A and event B, right? And when event B occurs, we only have 10 days to do action C, right? So if we are utilizing this automated update feature, that's going to save us a lot of time. So when we just moved this particular item from a Saturday to a Friday, it's asking us if we want to also update the related events. So we probably do. So I'm going to say yes to that. All right, and that will update our related events. So you're going to run through a little process like that when you're calendaring those rules, where you actually get to pause and you get to kind of edit, what's happening, okay, in this rule if you need to on the fly. Now you don't have to do it right here, okay? So if you just want to get these things on the calendar so that you can get moving, that's fine too. You can click done, and then if you need to go back later and modify that event or maybe multiple events within that rule, you can do that very easily by just going directly into that matter record. Okay, notice I have my reminders up here that got calendared. Okay, and all the other reminders got calendared on all those other days too. But if I need to modify something now later on, I can just go right into that matter record, open it up, go to my events tab on my matter record. Give it just a second here just to open this up. And in that events tab, there's a list of every single event that I calendared. And I can modify this list however I need to. Okay, so if I need to delete something or mark something as done or change a date, maybe that trial gets continued, okay, or gets delayed. I can go find that item in this list and I can just change the date, okay? It's just a matter of double clicking on it to open it and modifying the date. Okay, so very, very easy to manipulate those rules or those events after they've already been applied to our case. All right. So the key takeaways from that information, okay, is one, where do we go to invoke our rule? And remember, I said you can do it directly from your calendar by just right-clicking and selecting add events from a rule and then choosing the right rule. Or you can go directly into a matter record. Let's see here, I'll just open a random one here. Go into the events tab of a matter record and just right-click and select add events from a rule. It's up to you. It's up to you. A lot of times it depends on what rule you're invoking, right? If it's a trial date or something like that, chances are you may go right into the matter record, invoke that, rule there, right? So it's kind of automatically assigned to that matter. But, if it's something else, you can calendar it from the calendar. It really doesn't matter. There's no wrong way, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. Okay, the end result is the same. So find your preference and go for it. Okay? So that is how you invoke the rule. That's how you calendar it. But let's talk about the behind the scenes, right? How does the system actually do the math? How does the program know where to put event B after event A? How does it know how to calculate that? The best way to understand what each of your rules do is to really dive into the setup of the rules themselves, okay? So if you want to be a rules expert, follow this path. Go to File, Setup, Rules. This is the little area that you can go to where you can actually see your rules without actually calendaring something, okay? This is just a database that houses all of your rules. So if you want to see what the new adoption case rule does, you can just highlight that rule and click Edit, and it shows you a list of events within that rule, okay? If I want to see what the statute of limitations rule does, like for instance, here's a personal injury, 1-year statute of limitations. We'll do 2-year, that's a little bit more realistic. If I highlight that rule and I click Edit, that shows me every event inside of that rule, okay? So inside of this SOL, this PI-SOL 2-year rule, I've got 7 different events that are going to get calendared. So let's look at what these events are. I've got my expiration date, my SOL, right, my statute of limitations. And then after that, I have 6 reminders. Okay, I've got a 6-month reminder, a 3-month, a 1-month, a 7-day, a 1-day, and I also have a 1-year. So 1 year out from that expiration, I'm going to have a reminder on my calendar. So think about that. If we're a PI firm and we have, our client tells us our date of loss or we have our date of injury for our client, we know that the timer starts right then and there, right? So what I'm going to do to invoke this rule is I'm going to go to my calendar and I'm going to go to that day, okay, the date of loss or the date of injury, and I'm just going to right-click on my calendar on that day, and I'm going to click Add Events from a Rule. I'm going to go find my SOL rule, and I'm going to click Done. And basically what I just did was I told the system what day my client was injured, So now the program knows exactly where to place all of the reminders that will lead up to that expiration. All right. So again, if we go back into File, Setup, Rules, and we look at that SOL, notice I'm just highlighting it and I'm clicking Edit. Okay, if we look at this, the way that gets calculated is all based on our interval column and our relative column. Those are two very important columns that you need to understand if you want to understand rules in general, okay? Let's talk about it. SOL, 2 year. Notice my interval says 2 year, relative to 0, okay? That means that my 0 event, my 0 day, the system is going to count 2 years out from that, and it's going to put an event on there. Okay, what is my 0 day, my 0 event? That is the day I calendared. Okay, that's the date of loss. That's the date of injury. Okay, so the system's going to count 2 years out from that, and it's going to put a reminder on my calendar that says today is the expiration date of the Smith injury SOL. Okay, 6 months prior to that expiration date, notice I have a reminder that says -6M. That means -6 months. So 6 months prior to event number 1, notice my relative column says 1. That all is relative to the event column. So I'm saying 6 months prior to event number 1, I want you to calendar a reminder that tells me you have 6 months until the deadline. 3 months prior to event number 1. 1 month prior to event number 1. 7 days prior. 1 day prior, and then it looks like I added a little extra one on here at some point, and that was a -1 year. Okay, so what happens when I invoke this 2 year SOL rule is I'm going to have a reminder at the 1 year mark. I'm going to have a reminder at 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, 7 days, and 1 day out from that expiration date. And all I had to do was just calendar the date of loss or the date of injury. That's all I had to do. Okay, that's what we're trying to do with our rules. So if we look at, let's look at a different rule. Let's look at, a lot of times the new case rules are really, really cool. You can get real creative with new case rules. Think about all the things you do when you first take on a new case at your firm, right? You meet with the client. You know, within 24 hours, you run a conflict check. Within 7 days, you draft a fee agreement. Within 7 days, you request your retainer. Within 10 days, you follow up with the client to say, hey, how are you? Where's that fee agreement? Okay. 30 days out, you do a courtesy call to your client. Think about all those things, right? Put those into a rule. Create a rule or modify one of your default new case rules that come with your program, okay? And make that new case rule in line with what you do at your firm when you take on a new case, right? Let's look and see what mine does. I'm just going to highlight it and click Edit. All right, so let's take a look here real quick. Let's define a little bit of this. Well, it looks like 0 day we've got, or I'm sorry, event number 1, we meet with our client. Now it looks like 0 day and event number 1 are going to be synonymous in this scenario. Okay, so we meet with our client, we run our conflict check, we open our file in Abacus, we open our GL, okay, we send our confirmation letter, we draft our fee contract, and we call our client to check in. And if we look at our interval column, we've got different days that falls on. A lot of them take place on day 1. That's why it says, 0 day relative to 0. That's like the first day, right? We meet with our client, we run our conflict check, and we open our Abacus file and our GL, in our system, in our accounting program. So all of those happen on day 1, all right? Our confirmation letter is sent on day 7. So basically what that is, we have a reminder on our calendar that says, send the confirmation letter to client John Smith. Maybe it's a non-rep letter or something like that. Hey, we met with you a few days ago. You haven't retained our services. Please let us know if you want to. Okay. Then maybe 3 days after that, or maybe the confirmation letter, the confirmation letter could be, hey, yeah, we are taking your case, please pay us, right? Then we draft our fee contract, right? 3 days after we send our confirmation letter. Notice my relative column for event number 6. 3 days relative to event number 5. So that means that the program is going to calendar this drafting of the fee agreement reminder. It's going to calendar that 3 days after we send our confirmation letter. Okay? And then 7 days after we draft our fee agreement, our fee contract, we're going to call our client to discuss the case and check in. Okay? How do we know that? Because it clearly says here that the interval is 7D, 7 days. Okay, relative to 6, relative to event number 6. That's how the system does the math. So how do you change that if you need to? You don't want it to be, let's just say, hypothetically, you don't want it to be 7 days after event number 6. You want it to be 3 days after. How do I change that interval? And you can do this for any one of your events inside of a rule. All you have to do is just either double click on that event or click the little edit button down below. Okay, and that will open up the event properties. Notice on the rule calculation tab, there are 2 important fields, the interval field and the relative field. So if I want to switch my call client to discuss case reminder, if I want to switch that to be 3 days after we draft the fee contract, well, I just change that. 3 days relative to event number 6. I can change my relative event if I want to as well, up to you, okay? And I can change my interval type if I need to. By default, it sets to days, but I could change that to court days. That may be a nice one to do, okay? Weeks, months, quarters, years, okay? You get to do that. You get to decide. It's up to you. Take control of it. Own the rule. Tweak it the way you want it, and you'll never have to worry about it. Even down to handling weekends, okay? How does the system handle events that just so happen to fall on a weekend based off the mathematical calculation, right? We saw that when I calendared my, trial, right? If you choose to do system option setting, then what it's going to do is it's going to just, when you calendar that rule, it's just going to notify you. It's going to say, hey, this falls on whatever date, and you have to actually open up the event and modify it yourself, okay? If you want to be proactive, set the default to be the Friday before, okay? That's the most proactive way to handle event rules that fall on a weekend or events that fall on a weekend. Do them the Friday before. Okay, a little less proactive maybe is to push them to the Monday after. Now that's up to you. But one thing you probably shouldn't do is use the system option that just lets them fall on a weekend, because then you have to remember to change it yourself. And remember, the whole point of this, make your life easy, automate it, use the technology for what it's supposed to do. All right, so change that to the Friday if it isn't already there. Change it to the Friday. And that will put it the Friday before the weekend. And click done, and there you go. See that? Now it's set to 3 days relative to event number 6. You can do some other cool things in here. I'll just open this back up. Some of my favorite little automation techniques that you can do in event rule, I'll point out to you. Okay? One of the coolest ones, I think, is attaching a form to your event. A lot of people don't even know that this is a feature in Abacus, and usually when I tell them on trainings, their minds are blown. So think about, a lot of those deadlines, a lot of those reminders you have on your calendar have to do with form submission, right? Submitting forms to your courts, sending letters to opposing counsel, sending records requests to hospitals and doctors, right? What if we just attached our form directly to our event? Then not only are we automatically calendaring the reminder about that form that needs to be completed on that day, but also in our little documents list, let me show you this here. If you go up here to Documents, there is an option for today's documents. And this directly integrates with your calendar. If you open up today's documents, this is going to show you a list of every event on your calendar for that day, whatever day you identify in the top left corner. And it's going to show you the forms attached to those events. And all you have to do is just start clicking the go button. This could potentially have 20, 30 different forms in it, depending upon the size of your firm. All you have to do is come in, highlight the first one, click go. When that one's done generating the form, highlight the next one, click go. Generate that form. Work that into your daily routine, okay? If you're the person at the firm who's doing form generation a lot, you should be, harping on the rest of your, harp on this feature to the rest of your colleagues. Start attaching forms to your events, whether you do it in a rule or if they are even just calendaring single events on the calendar, attach it there. Okay, there's a forms button right there where you can attach forms to it. Okay, but again, it all comes back to automation. When you are looking at those rules in your rules database, how can you best automate your calendaring? If I know that this reminder has to do with filing some sort of document or form, why not just attach the form right to the event? Then we don't even have to worry about going to find the form on that day. It's right there. We just click go and it fills it in for us. Even things like, other event details. Think about that event window. What are some of the important fields on that event window? Well, how about who the event's assigned to? How about the priority? How about the time of day or the length of time? You can default things like that. If there's one person in our office that always does form generation, why not just default the who code to that person? That'll ensure that it always goes on that person's calendar. So you can even do little, things like that inside of your little event properties in your rule database. Okay, so those are the things I want you to think about when you're working with rules. Okay, usually the best place to start when you want to start modifying how rules work, the best place to start is ask yourself how you wish they would work, right? How would this rule make my life easier? And then go into the rule and look at the different events to see if any of that already exists, right? A lot of it will probably already exist and you didn't even know it was there, right? Then start to think, how can I modify it to get it more in line with what I'm looking for? Maybe that modification is just a matter of changing an interval or changing a relative or maybe changing a description of an event or attaching a form. Okay, you can do all of that. You have the power, but you got to know what each of these little columns has to do with, okay, what our order of events are inside of our rule and how we invoke that rule on our calendar. Okay, so I hope that everybody found that informative. I hope at least you have a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish with rules. All right, and I'll open it up to any questions that anybody has about calendaring or rules in general. Okay, so please again utilize that little questions box so that I can monitor those and I can ask those, and I will read the questions aloud to everybody before I answer them. Okay, remember, you're muted, so I can't hear you. Make sure you type it directly into the questions box. And while you're all thinking, just keep in mind, rules can be used on a, custom level that, are, personal to your law firm, like maybe just internal workflow type of reminders. And they're also obviously used for like civil procedure and things like that. If you are interested in a predefined rule set, from your state or something like that, let us know because we actually have them. Okay, if you need the California Civil Procedure rules, let us know. We have them. If you need local rules, LA Superior, San Diego, if you need those, let us know. We have those as well. Okay, we can get those for you. We can install them in your program if you don't already have them. All right, but you're not required to get them. You can create your own, just like I showed you. All right. Don't forget, I may have went quick through this little section. I was showing you how to view what existing rules already have and how to modify those. There is an add button in this rules database where you can just start from scratch if you want to. Okay, you can literally start with a completely blank slate and just add your own rules. Just remember, whenever you add, you always have to give a code to the rule. So that way, you have something to choose. So I would just call this, I just call this webinar. Okay, so that would be the code I would use. And then I would go through and just start building out, my different events within that rule. Okay, using the same logic and features that I showed you previously. Okay. Another little pro tip while people are thinking of questions, don't forget you have other people in the firm that utilize rules as well. So to be respectful to them, a lot of times it is very nice to clone your rule if you're going to modify it for your own purposes. Okay, make a clone of the rule and edit the clone. That way you are not, changing a rule that maybe somebody else really enjoyed. So you can have different versions of a rule, basically, is what I'm getting at. So rather than reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch, if you want a modified version of the new adoption case rule, just clone the original and give it a new name. Okay, call it Scott's adoption case rule, something like that. Okay. All right, I am not seeing any questions, so make sure you get those questions in there. And while you're thinking, just a couple more minutes to let people think, I'll go ahead and bring up our lovely little slide here that I want everybody to see. Our Abacus Maximus User Conference. You guys have heard me talk about it on other webinars. Go to AbacusMaximus.com to see who our guest speakers are this year. Okay, it's in Las Vegas, just like last year. This year it's going to be at Caesars Palace, June 24th through the 26th. Great excuse to come to Las Vegas. But we're going to have all kinds of great speakers, and right now only our webinar attendees are getting the $100 off. So when you go to register at AbacusMaximus.com, make sure you use the discount code webinar when you check out. So that's on top of the early bird pricing that we're doing through the 15th. So that's a pretty significant discount. If you've ever been to any legal conferences in the past, you'll know that is our conference price is uber cheap compared to others out there. We had a massive turnout last year, so please make sure you get your tickets as quickly as you can. You do get all of your continuing certification credits and all that good stuff like CLE and all that, and anything required by the bar and all that good stuff. It does count towards those credits. It's going to be really awesome. We've got Forbes is going to be speaking. Ms. Brockovich is going to be speaking. A lot of cool speakers, and also a lot of great breakout sessions. You actually get to meet and sit down with me. I know you're all dying to do that. So I'll be doing a lot of breakout sessions for everyone, and we really dive in deep on what you guys want to know. You can pull us aside, pick our brains, ask us about new features, recommend new features. We're going to be doing a big roadmap about where the company's going, where the software is going. So it's a really, really cool experience. And like I said, it's a great reason to take a business trip to Las Vegas. So no questions got entered. So apparently I did my job pretty well today. I really appreciate everybody's attendance today. I hope to see you on next week's webinar. Again, just go to abacusnext.com/webinars and sign up. And I hope to see you again next week. My name is Scott Heist. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.